Welcome to the Float Podcast, an entrepreneurial journey. My name is Coffin Brown, once a wide-eyed hippie traveling the world in my 20s, trying to figure out what my pursuit of happiness is. After visiting over 300 locations and installing over 400 float pods, I have finally found my happiness.
Hi.
Hello, beautiful. You're looking beautiful as ever.
I know, I'm wearing my Living by Intention t-shirt. So
what do you all do with Living by Intentions?
So Living by Intention is multifaceted. So what it's developing into are these holistic experiences and events that involves catering, but also mindfulness, movement, masterminds, retreats, and programming for essentially leaders who are looking for a deeper way to activate, to be more productive, one-on-one guidance so that they can really show up as even better leaders than they already are. So like I said, it's multifaceted because we have the in-person experiences and then we have the education piece and the support for people who are essentially here like ourselves to do that legacy work, to leave a big impact with their companies, but who also want to be more tuned in with the health of their mind, body, and spirit. So the experiences are a way to give that to people tangibly, right? So then they experience my cooking, they experience my guidance as a movement teacher, they experience my mastermind facilitations, which involves really a group focused networking experience where you are breaking down your goals in a setting in which you can do so with other people, which is really, really beneficial, right? When you find yourself in the room with other impactful leaders, and then you have someone there guiding you all through the big, big questions, not just, okay, let's enjoy some drinks and some snacks and go ahead and meet your people. It's like, no, actually, okay, question number one, what does legacy mean to you? And how are you going about laying your legacy down? So the word intention in and of itself means what we know it to mean, which is that mindful seed, right? The awareness aspect, setting your intentions for the week, right? Setting your attention to something that you want to manifest. But then also it means to heal a wound, which I didn't even realize until I started the company. And it just fits so perfectly because, you know, from a surface level, the idea is to help people get healthy, right? But on a deeper level, when we embrace our health mentally, emotionally, and physically, there's a really deep sense of healing that takes place. You can call it what you want, but we're elevating here. We're accessing human potential and the evolutionary process by taking care of our bodies, but not just the physical, the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect of ourselves as well. So that's living by intention as a whole. It's essentially a global network of impactful leaders and helping people get to that point if that's where they want to be.
Gotcha. So how did you get to a point where you wanted to start something like this, though? I guess, where was your entrepreneurial journey? Where did that start?
I mean, as you know, we worked together almost 10 years ago. And I think that for me, it started actually at a young age, looking around and recognizing, okay, cool. I've got leaders in my family. I've got people who are showing up for their community, but they aren't showing up for their bodies and they struggle with addiction. What does that look like? That looks like complete burnout. That looks like disease. That looks like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, stress-related illnesses, cancer. People don't realize that stress really is one of the root causes of disease in the body. Not only that, but what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis literally results in complete, like a just messed up situation in the body. And people are walking around living like this, settling for being in pain, settling for mental fatigue, settling for gut issues. You know what I'm saying? And just almost living in that hangover mode as if it's normal. and they don't even realize that you can actually feel better in your body. So I grew up witnessing all this. I grew up looking around and being like, oh, okay, people want to have drive, but then they're driving themselves in the ground. And like, I don't want to feel like that. And I also don't want to do something that I'm not completely in love with for a living, because I also grew up around a bunch of people that just did what they needed to in order to survive, or in order to, get the material things that they really sought after. But yeah, it was just unbalanced all around. So right out of high school, I started getting into, I went into a trade school that focused on holistic health and healing, nutrition, and all this kind of stuff. So I got started with this path out the gate, honestly.
So right out of high school, you jumped into health and wellness, and you had a healthy lifestyle for the most part. But did you, I guess, because I obviously met you in Arizona, as you had mentioned, we knew each other. We met each other over a decade ago now. But yeah, just under a decade. But you right out of high school had a healthy lifestyle. What took you out to Phoenix though? Because I knew you're from Michigan, right?
Yeah.
So what brought you out to Phoenix then? Sorry if I'm
That.
going too far into your where your upbringing and stuff's from. I just like to know the ins and outs of who the guests are in that. So
Yeah, no, that right there. There were schools of thought that I could go to, a college level type of education that gave me the certificates, that gave me the certification and the knowledge that I needed, the training that I needed to offer these services professionally. So that was the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, which was right out of Tempe. I also went through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. So that was the foundation of what this business has developed into.
Gotcha. So what you obviously you had great education, allows you to offer professional services and stuff to help people with their lifestyle and that. How did you get into floating particularly? Did you just find True Rest in Tempe, Arizona and wander in one day and introduce yourself, or how did that work?
Right, literally. I walked in, I don't remember her name now, it's a Granny moment, but she was working at the front desk. It was literally my first float. My partner at the time got one for me. And I went back there and I floated and I just sang the entire time. It was a total mermaid moment where I just floated and sang, and it was a whole thing, and did breath work in there and just really was able to get the full experience of essentially like people who come out with like the best float ever. That was my float. And I had this really euphoric moment where everything looked familiar. And I went to the front desk and I was like, I'm going to work here. I have those moments in my life where it's almost like deja vu, where people feel familiar, places feel familiar, and it's just a knowing. And sure enough, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm putting in my 2 weeks right now. So there's an opening. And then from there, I met Amir and Holly, interviewed right away, and they hired me right away. So.
Gotcha. So what was that, summer of 2014?
Man, yeah, around then.
Yeah, because that I was it Kendra maybe?
No,
it was not Kendra, because I think we started around the same time there when I first joined the team at FlowPod, and I was technically the first ever employee at FlowPod. But when I joined the team there, and you were just coming on board with True Rest, I believe. I could be wrong. You may have been there a few months actually beforehand. I just remember your energy when I first got there. True Rest and their overall concept had a very cool vibe to it when it first started back. The franchise started back in 2014, and you were part of that original team, if you will, that original I call them hippie dippy folk, the love tribe, the spiritual leaders in Arizona, more or less. But that you kind of, when I first met you guys and I started hanging out with you, I went to a few burner parties. super dope time. We sat around a pool one time. I don't know if you remember this party or not, but we sat around a pool. There was candles that were lined up around the pool, and we all went around the pool saying what we loved. Do you remember that party or no? And inside, you guys were all making music. I remember Sana, Brittany, a few other folks were there, but that Brittany and Sana were also part of the True Rest, that like original True Rest tribe. But that's it's interesting because that's where I met you at. I think that might have been like, because you were going through your education and learning, how to be more or less a lifestyle coach, a mentor to people, and that being a part of that group, I can say, when it comes to that group as a whole, it was such a loving, accepting group of people, and you were a part of that. So I really enjoyed that. But those were the good old days. But you since being with the True Rest team and venturing out into the world, I'm now coming up on 30 next month. You're obviously getting into your later 20s, and so we've come a long way since that point in our careers. And so since then, you've started your own company, Living by Intentions. Is that right?
Yep, Living by Intention. Yeah.
Living by Intention, and you've gotten. I know you had mentioned to me before, in just private conversation, we're talking about you getting into doing retreats, offering that kind of service. Can you tell us a little bit more, without giving away your overall business concept? Because obviously that's what makes the Alexis Holland experience or the Living by Intention experience unique. So
and that's also something, the older I get, the more I realize it's like, no matter what, like nobody can replicate me and what I provide, and so now it's just a matter of knowing our value, right? And not, like, for me, like a non-negotiable is working for someone. I'm only here to work with people as an equal, you know what I'm saying? So that's the non-negotiable that I've learned over the years. And that's that. So, people can.
Was that a struggle for you?
Oh yeah, I've learned that the hard way. And I think that you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've really had to learn that the hard way, especially being a woman of color and also like a white passing woman, where it's almost like historically the light-skinned females get this like the light-skinned Black women get a very, very strange treatment. And that goes, that's a different conversation altogether, but oftentimes it's this mammy archetype of like, oh, well, you're talented and you're beautiful. And a part of me knows that I can take advantage of you. So I'm going to do so because historically we've done so. So I've had to work through that aspect quite a bit for the last, for the majority of my 20s, I've had to recognize what that form of racism looks like and how to deal with it. My form of dealing with it is working for myself at this point. So unfortunately, it's something that's kind of passive aggressive in this country still. And I'm in the South now, so it's even more pervasive here in Florida. And you just gotta know how to speak up and hold your ground, in the room, know how to create a seat at the table versus being the one that serves the table, if you know what I mean.
Would you say, because I was going to ask you real quick on this, because I know that when it comes to race and those types of subjects, that could be a subject in itself or a conversation in itself. But a couple of years back now, since George Floyd's passing, and a few things have happened in our country. You and I have talked along the way through those things, whether it's social justice issues and that kind of things. The reason why I'm asking you this is, would you say that when it comes to your drive as an independent biracial woman, would you say that some of that drive was because of that unfortunate incident?
Definitely, especially within the wellness industry, because the wellness industry is ridden with a lot of what we've run into is that all of the like the majority, I'll say, majority of the wellness owned spaces, including float spas, including anything wellness related, yoga, fitness, this, that, or the other, is white owned. Mm-hmm. And we found like a huge part of the conversation was, oh my gosh, we're so underrepresented in this field. So yeah, to say my drive has accelerated since then is an understatement. I had some huge discourse and very unfortunate but meant to be moments with specifically white-owned yoga studios in the area that were paying me less than other instructors, that were giving me less opportunities than them, despite how much education I had. And it's funny because they, at the forefront, have these big, pages now on their websites of like, we're diverse and inclusive. And then you look at who's teaching or the people that are providing services at their spa or at their studios, and they're all white.
It's almost like social pandering is what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's so weird because it's like, wait a second. And then when you bring up the conversation, here's why it's real bad in the wellness industry, because there's a lot of people, like you kind of talked about, the hippie dippy types, who are also very toxically positive, and they're do-gooders at their core. So when you present a problem or something that might bring up some conflict or even just a different perspective, they shut down immediately. And they're like, no, there's no way I did anything wrong. I'm a good person. I teach yoga. I have a spa. I do good things for people. Da, 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 da. And the list goes on and on. So instead of solving the problem, they stay in that space of like, oh my God, she said I did something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. And it's like this really awkward thing. And then they never actually make the change. Very few are making the change. So, we just went on a whole tangent there, but that just goes to show, like, for me, what I realized as a multi-racial woman is that it's very important for people like you and I, with the backgrounds that we have, to have ownership over these spaces and to be in leadership roles so that we can create these beautiful solutions and these beautiful offerings and companies that have a perspective from all racial backgrounds. And that just does not go in the wellness industry. That's also a very, very important conversation that we need to have in every single industry in this country. I mean, as we just saw, we have the first Black woman in the Supreme Court. You know what I mean? Like, we're reaching these milestones, but again, first and only. It's still like, why are we still like the only ones in the room? Why is it just that?
Can I ask though, when you say, when it comes to that there has to be a first to everything. I mean, the steps forward that we're taking, like the Supreme Court justice getting elected and first African-American woman, that is a accomplishment, that something that it's almost like we're in this place where it's like we're excited, but we're also frustrated that it's taken so long. And that's where it's the balance. It's the balancing act of trying to keep your sanity there. But I can say, since the last 10 years, I can say I've been a lot more, the glass is half full as opposed to empty. In my early years, I was very much like, this is ridiculous, fight, rah, rah, but it's almost like what you've done with your own career. You've taken I'd rather work with somebody than work for somebody. But there are people out there that are working people that don't have the entrepreneurial personality type, that care about owning their own. But at the same time, you should be trying to take ownership of what you do, whether it's you actually owning a percentage and equity of the company, but also whether you're a leadership position trying to work your way up into the company, you should take ownership in what you do. And I think that's where we're going to stop being stereotyped. There's some things in the business world that you look at, like football. NFL is a straight up business. That's something, when you look at it, Black quarterbacks at one time weren't educated enough to be or not, they weren't as the perspective of the scouts and stuff was that black quarterbacks could never succeed in the NFL. And that's something that has diminished. It's been a lot more inclusive in that, but you then take it another level further. This last year, we find out that out of 32 teams, there's only one or two, or there's one black head coach in the NFL. You take a step back and you see these type of separations. There's things that we could, I guess, influence, whether it's you influencing, trying to get more true inclusion, not just social pandering into the yoga space, or even taking something, even a lot of these like music festivals that are owned by predominantly white males. I mean, males and females, but males predominantly.
Same with the music industry, same with Hollywood. Like I said, like this is every field, but I agree with you. And the solution is for us to do our research and then do something about it. You know what I'm saying? Instead of staying in this victim cycle of like, oh, I can't, or oh, I won't, or oh, if this, then that, like in a negative mindset, right? Like, oh, well, if I go to my boss and say, have a conversation and say, hey, I noticed that Jimmy over here, we're in the same position, but he's making $20,000 more per year. And I want to challenge that because that's happening, Cawthon. Like that's seriously happening. And the big realization for me is that, yes, that's still very much so happening right now, but also it's a serious generational cycle because Jimmy is getting $20,000 more per year for the same position. And that $20,000 gets to go to his kids' college education. So by the time that his children get to the age of going to college, he's got a huge savings. But the person who was a minority, Black, or a person of color who was in that same position worked even harder, but was paid $20,000 less. By the time their kids get to college, they don't have that savings. And so it's that impactful. And we need to create more systems that are safe, like HR departments that are diverse, right? That people can go to and feel safe so that these conversations can be had and that solutions can be provided right away, so it's the first step though is doing the research, asking around, hey, how much are you making? Oh, really? How much oh, really? Like actually digging and realizing like, oh, I am getting underpaid. All the other colleagues here who are Black and brown are getting underpaid right now. That's a problem. And having the courage to union up and have that conversation. When I did that, it resulted in a huge, it essentially resulted in 10 of the senior teachers at the studio that I was teaching at, they all quit because I had the courage to share my story. And then all of a sudden, even though majority of these women were white, they all had stories of mistreatment from the owners as well. And so once one person has the courage to step forward and speak up, the next thing you know, like so many people will also come forward. And then from there, you're released from that burden. Like I can't tell you how much success and how much growth I've had since not working for people like that, and it's been awesome, essentially, which has led me to things like everything that I'm doing now and recognizing my value.
With you recognizing your value, what do you have as far as what do you have right now in your, because I know you were chefing, if you will, you've been doing some retreats as well. What's on the horizon for Alexis Holland coming up? Music, retreats?
Yeah, so it's all like one thing that I've recognized now is that all my offerings are going to be high ticket. I'll have some aspects of what I do to serve the community, but right now the most important aspect of the legacy that I'm building is creating a network of other leaders who are making big impact. So in order to do that, I have to really curate these high-end events and these experiences that will attract other like minds who are already in these roles. So that's where everything is moving. High-end catering, high-end retreats for people and who they want to actually support and offer a bonus to their team in retreat format, right? And one-on-one programming, as well as group programming for, like corporate wellness packages. And this is where it's headed. This is where it's at right now. And I'm really excited because, again, as you step into recognizing your value, it's just, you're the only factor that's keeping you away from that higher ticket. You know what I'm saying? You're literally the only factor. I'm the only factor that's undervaluing myself. But see, that's where this conversation comes full circle, because until we get out from under the people who do not value you, you won't ever see that. You
True.
won't ever be able to look in the mirror and recognize your value when there's somebody that you're working for that's trying to get you to work for them for free. It's like, whoa, okay, no wonder that takes time. And then personally, Coffin, as a chef, as a coach, as a musician, damn, I'm good. like, damn, I'm good, my bro.
I love it.
There is nobody making the food that I'm making. There is nobody playing the kind of music I'm playing and singing the way that I do. There is nobody that can hold space for leaders the way that I do. Nobody on the planet. I'm telling you right now, I'm special. And it took me a while to really figure out how much that actually is valued. And I'm so glad that I've arrived.
I love it. You have arrived, bro. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for coming onto the podcast. Like I said, I shoot these really short. They're probably 20, 30 minutes. And, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, where you come from. I did want to ask you before you go, though, how often are you floating nowadays?
I would love to be floating more often. The float spots here are okay. They aren't.
Any float pods out that way?
I mean, we got the ocean, so that's kind of like my float pod.
There you go. No shout out. I love it.
But I do love me some floating, and the sensory deprivation aspect is a really, really important of my personal practice, So having that sensory deprivation experience where you're in, at least once a month, but ideally having my own pod, like building out my first home specifically with a float room where I can tap in. And that's just what I see happening. So,
well, anytime you're in the Indianapolis area, obviously feel free to let me know and we can link up. And as well, a place to floats downtown, I can set you up with a free float down there. So anytime you're here, I can switch up with a float room or a float pod. Really up to you. But yeah, I look forward to
float date.
Float date. Yes, indeed. I love it. I love it. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on again, and have a good one.
All right. Talk to you soon.